We will start with the recent answers that Swamiji has given to the people's questions from the satsangs. This is the January 21st message. In that, the first question is, it's a question by me, Dr. Nikhil. Although the predominant quality of Lord Shiva is tamas, why did his incarnation Adi Shankara not express it? So the detailed question is as follows. This question is related to one of the discourses you gave in reply to Shri Anil's question. You said that whenever a particular quality is required to a greater extent to carry out the mission of God, the energetic incarnation of God having that particular quality predominantly enters a selected human being to form the human incarnation. In the energetic incarnation, Lord Datta is already merged. So the human incarnation also has Datta merged in it, but it expresses the predominant quality of that energetic incarnation. So in the case of Adi Shankara, who was a human incarnation of Lord Shiva, he did not express much tamas, even though tamas is the predominant quality of Lord Shiva. Instead, I feel he mostly expressed sattvam because he gave a lot of excellent spiritual knowledge throughout his life. By his life, he justified the statement Jnanam Maheshwaradichhe, which means that Lord Shiva is the source of spiritual knowledge. Of course, Adi Shankara also composed several devotional stotras. Since devotion is an expression of tamas, we can say that he expressed some tamas in that manner. Swami, could you please explain this point? So Swami replied, the quality of tamas means rigidity and firm decision. If that rigidity leads to injustice, that tamas is bad. Ravana and Duryodhana were such examples. But tamas can also be used in the right direction. Goddess Parvati was very firm in doing penance to attain Lord Shiva as her husband. Such tamas is required in the final stage of the spiritual path. Adi Shankara too was very firm in taking sainthood and leaving his mother in a pitiable condition. She had been abandoned by all her relatives since she had given birth to Shankara as a widow. While she was pregnant, her husband had died. She was very old and was in need of some attendant. Shankara was her only son. In that situation, Shankara needed extreme firmness, which is tamas, to leave her and take sainthood for the sake of propagating the right spiritual knowledge, which was necessary to bring the atheists to the correct path. In any case, all the three qualities are always associated together. One quality being predominant does not mean that the other two are absent. Hence, Shankara had sufficient amount of sattvam or knowledge too. His knowledge was sattvam. But in his commentaries, you will find firmness in his logic. This firmness of logic is tamas in his sattvam. In the knowledge, there is tamas. So, knowledge is sattvam basically, but the logic, the firm logic within that sattvam, within sattvam means knowledge, sattvat sanjayate jnanam. So, within the sattvam, there is tamas, there is which is obvious in his logic. So, this is a wonderful point that Swamiji has given, that he expressed knowledge, but there was tamas even in the knowledge. So tamas is definitely not a bad quality, as Swamiji has explained. It is only the direction that matters. The next question is by Shri Karthik, and he asks, what is the meaning of Trikarmedma Dahanalaya in the Shri Datta Navaratna, one of the names of Lord Datta? He is called the Trikarmedma Dahanalaya. We are praying to him, worshipping him. So Shri Karthik asks in detail, does Trikarmedma Dahanalaya in your composition Shri Datta Navaratna mean the destruction of the Agami, Sanchita and Prarabdha karmas? So these three, just to clarify, these three are, the Agami is the fruits of deeds that are yet to be received. Meaning you have done the deeds and the results are yet pending. So those are the Agami. The results are yet to come. The sanchita is the soul's inherent tendencies or inherent qualities which have been accumulated over millions of janmas. They are the inherent nature of that individual soul, and they don't get changed very easily. The third category is the prarabdha karmas. These are the fruits of deeds that have matured and are to be exhausted within this janma. In fact, the physical body that we have got is also an expression of that prarabdha. That prarabdha karma is consumed in giving us a particular body. So the three karmas are the agami, which is the results, the results which are pending, meaning the deed has been done and the results are yet to come. So those pending results are called agami karmas. The sanchita karma is the soul's inherent tendency which is accumulated over all the past births of the individual, of the soul. And the third category, which is the prarabdha karma, is that part of the karmas which is going to yield its fruit, or which has yielded its fruit by giving us this birth. So that is the prarabdha karma. So what Karthik is asking is, the trikarmedhma dahanalaya, does it refer to the three karmas? The three karmas referred to in that statement, are they the agami, sanchita and prarabdha karmas? Or the alternative is, it might even refer to, what Karthik thinks is, it might even refer to satkarma, akarma and vikarma. Satkarma is good action or prescribed action, things that we should do. Akarma means inaction, meaning not doing what we are supposed to do. And vikarma is wrong action or prohibited action, things that we should not be doing. If you engage in that, that is vikarma. So satkarma, akarma and vikarma. So now Karthik is asking whether trikarmedhma dahanalaya, does it mean agami, sanchita and prarabdha, or does it mean satkarma, akarma and vikarma? So Swamiji replied, trikarmedhma dahanalaya means that we bow down to that fire-like God Datta, who burns our sanchita, prarabdha and agami karmas as if they were three dry sticks. Idhma means dried fuel, like sticks, which you burn in the fire. So Lord Datta is the fire, and what does he burn? He burns the three karmas. What are the three karmas? Swamiji has clarified that it is the sanchita, prarabdha and agami karmas that he will burn like fire. So that is the resolution to Karthik's question. The next question is by Shri Ganesh. He asks, how can one turn a bad quality like anger towards God? Swamiji has repeatedly said that there is no quality such as bad. Whatever has been created by God is good, and we only have to turn the qualities towards God so that they become good, the way they are meant to be. So Ganesh explains his question in detail. He says, I have learned from you that we can use our so-called bad qualities in the right direction, in the service of God. For example, if we have lust, we can use it to appreciate the beauty of God. But how can one turn our anger towards God? How can we express anger towards God? Or would such expression of anger towards God not be out of jealousy, which in turn is rooted in ego? So that is his question. Now Swamiji replied, when the devotee is unable to attain God's grace, he or she becomes angry. Here, anger means the pain mixed emotion that one feels for not being able to attain his grace. This is the good phase of anger. The bad phase of anger is anger due to jealousy, which is rooted in the ego. Every quality, whether it is said to be good or bad, has both good and bad phases. You must only use the good phase of each quality. Anything in the direction of God is always good. Anything, excuse me, a lot of noise. Bharat, can you please monitor the people who are unmuted? Okay. So what Swamiji is saying is that the good phase of anger is when a devotee feels anger because he or she is not able to attain God's grace. So that the inability to attain God's grace can create anger in the mind, and that is the good phase of anger, because that will push you in the right direction. The bad phase of anger is the anger due to jealousy, which is rooted in the ego. So every quality, whether it is said to be good or bad, has both good and bad phases. You must only use the good phase of each quality. Anything in the direction of God is always good, and anything in the direction of the world is always bad. The Gopikas reached Goloka, the 15th world, which lies even above the abode of God, through their illegitimate love towards God Krishna. On the other hand, Dharmaraja performed many religious sacrifices, in which he did legitimate charity to sages. Yet he was only able to reach heaven, which is Svargaloka. It's the third world above earth. The direction decides whether the quality is good or bad. In the same lock, the key turned in one direction results in locking, which is bandha, whereas the same key turned in the opposite direction results in unlocking, which is moksha. Bandha and moksha are mutual opposites, locking and unlocking. Bandha means to tie down or bonds, bondage, and moksha means freedom or liberation. You liberate from the bond. So both God and the world are diagonally opposite to each other as per the Veda. Duramete viparite vishuchi, which we heard even last time. So that completes that question. The next question is by Srimati Padmaram Garu. She asks, why does God remain silent about the destruction of the idols of God? So she describes it further, saying, many idols of God are being destroyed these days. Even in the past, foreign invaders did the same. These are not just idols. They are the very God himself for the devotees. We feel deeply hurt when we get to know about such incidents. My question is, why is God or Paramatma remaining silent about such incidents? Why is he not stopping such horrible things from happening? Swami replied, you leave this topic to God himself, who knows what to do and when. Interreligious differences are responsible for such wrong actions. Such things will come to a permanent end only when the universal spirituality preaching of the equality of all religions is well understood by everybody on earth. So what Swamiji is saying is that if we just simply find fault and with each other, those differences are not going to get resolved. The root cause itself has to be eliminated, and that root cause elimination will happen when the message of universal spirituality, which shows that all religions are inspired by the same, were given by the same God, when that is very clear, only then this problem of religious differences will vanish. Otherwise, it will remain, no matter what resolution we try to find for it. The next question is by Shri Rajashekhar. He asks, why did the one and only unimaginable God appear in many forms like Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva? So Swamiji replied, Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva are the three faces of the one divine personality. We say that a certain person has a multifaceted personality. It does not mean that the person has several faces and is split into several persons. The three facets of the personality are in the one face of the person. Similarly, the three divine personalities are in that one single divine personality. But some devotees have a great liking for a specific side of God's personality. To please such devotees, the one God became three gods. For the devotee who likes all the three sides of God's personality, God appears as the single God Datta. This is the concept of unity in diversity and diversity in unity. In spite of the observed diversity of his forms, God is not actually divided. He only appears to be divided. This is what is said in the Gita, Avibhaktam vibhakteshu vibhaktam ivacha sthitam. So it is, he is avibhaktam, he is undivided. Vibhaktam means to be divided. He is avibhaktam, even though he appears vibhakta, means he appears to be divided. It is vibhaktam ivacha sthitam, vibhaktam iva. He is only appearing to be divided, not really. The next question is by Shri Phani. He asks, how can one have single pointed devotion towards God when God exists in many forms? So his descriptive question is, God exists in the form of many energetic incarnations and in the form of many human incarnations, including the contemporary human incarnations. If we express devotion towards all those forms of God, how can we attain the state of single pointed devotion towards God, which is called Eka Bhakti? It is said, Eka Bhaktir Vishishyate. Eka Bhakti is supposed to be the highest. So how can we reach that stage when there are so many multiple forms of God? If our devotion is split in all of them or towards all these forms, then how can we attain that state of Eka Bhakti? So Swamiji is explaining. Eka Bhakti means the devotion towards God without any diversion towards worldly bonds. The devotee is diverted from the state of Eka Bhakti due to worldly bonds and not due to the different bonds of devotion with different forms of the same God. So, fantastic concept, really impressive, really impressive. The question is whether you are devoted to God or to the world. It is not a question of whether you are devoted to one form of God or more forms of God. A student complains about the various subjects present in the college curriculum and says that he is unable to concentrate on studies due to that diversity. This is a false complaint. The reality is that he is attracted to many non-academic activities like games, movies, reading novels, gossiping with friends, etc. That is why he is unable to concentrate on his studies. The multiplicity of subjects in the curriculum is not the real problem. The real problem is the distractions towards multiple non-academic activities and forms of entertainment. He is trying to divert our attention from the real point due to his overintelligence. So such a unique point, because this question, even personally to me also, many people have asked this question as to, there are so many forms of God, which form should we have devotion for? Isn't that a problem? And particularly people from other religions also, they ask, particularly question to Hindus, that you have so many gods, so your devotion gets divided among all of them. So it is really the issue of our worldly bonds diverting our attention, not the different forms of God, because the God is the same. Just the previous question was about Avibhaktam Vibhakteshu. He is Avibhaktam, he is not divided. The multiple forms are not different entities. He is only one God, one entity. He is only appearing in different forms. Excellent answer. The next question is by Kumari Mohini. She is asking, what is the difference between Maya, Mahamaya and Mula Maya? So these three types of Maya, and previously Swamiji has explained that in great detail. So she is asking that question again. So Swamiji replied, do you know that Maya is also called Mohini? This is kind of a interesting coincidence because her name is also Mohini. So Maya is also called Mohini. So Swamiji is explaining, Maya means illusion in its basic sense. Now, there are these different types of illusions. If the illusion is such that it can be removed by human effort, it is called Maya. If the illusion cannot be removed by any human effort, it is Mahamaya. So what is Mahamaya? God appears to be energy and energy appears to be matter by the will of God. These are examples of Mahamaya. Because for God, the matter and energy are they are unreal, but for us, they are completely real. In fact, we are the products of that matter and energy. The soul is the product of the matter and energy. The energy converted in a work form is awareness, and the awareness is the soul. So we cannot cross that illusion. It may be an illusion, but it is an illusion only for God. It is not an illusion for us. So therefore it is Mahamaya. It is a cosmic illusion. For every soul it is an illusion. It is not only like my own dream may be an illusion for myself. This is not an individual illusion. This is a cosmic illusion. The entire cosmos, for all the souls, that matter and energy, they appear to be real. So that is Mahamaya. It is an illusion only for God. Now, beyond even the Mahamaya is the Mula Maya. Mula means the root. So Mula Maya is the root illusion. So what is that Mula Maya? Swamiji says, Mula Maya means the root reason for the creation of the illusion. That root reason is actually the entertainment of God. It is said that God wished to create creation because he was not entertained. For the sake of his entertainment, he created. So that root reason is the Mula Maya, is the Mula Maya, which is his entertainment, his desire for entertainment. If there are any, if some points are not clear, please do ask the question. Maybe if I am saying something wrong, or you can, if you can stop me, and Swamiji will correct me if required.
Can you please repeat that Maya, the three kinds of Maya?
Three types of Maya.
Uh-huh.
Okay, three level is the simple basic level is Maya generally means illusion. So we are talking about three types of illusion. What are these three types of illusion? First is Maya, second is Mahamaya, third is Mula Maya. So Maya means if the illusion can be eliminated by you, if you can overcome it, it is Maya. If you cannot overcome it,
Okay.
it means it is a cosmic level illusion. It is not your individual illusion. Right? And that cosmic level illusion is that the same energy appears to be matter. Okay, the same God appears to be energy, and the same energy appears to be matter. Now that I cannot just by my own realization, I cannot convert the matter into energy and energy into God.
Yeah.
So that is a cosmic level illusion. No soul can cross that illusion. That only God can cross. For example, Swamiji has given the example of Shankaracharya. He was standing outside Mandana Mishra's door, and the door was locked. Mandana Mishra was not opening the door. Shankaracharya had gone there to ask for Vada Bhiksha. He wanted to have a debate with Mandana Mishra, but he was doing some these Shraddha rituals inside. So he was not opening the door. Shankaracharya walked through the door. So the door, which was made out of matter, became unreal to him. But it is not going to become unreal to you and me. So because it is part of the cosmic illusion, only for God it is unreal. So that is the Mahamaya. And the Mula Maya is the base. Why did he even create? So the God, unimaginable God, is appearing to be energy, and that energy is also appearing to be matter in some places. But why did all this transformation happen? Why did creation happen? The root reason for that is Mula Maya. It is basically the will of God. He wished to create. That wish is the Mula Maya. Is that correct, Swamiji?
Yes.
Swamiji, your voice is not heard, Swamiji. Still not. Anjane, I think it's muted.
Hello?
Yes, now we can hear.
See, actually, there are only two terms there, Avidya and Maya. Actually, this Mula Maya, Mahamaya, Maya, this classification is not existing in the scripture. Some people have created this classification also. So, Avidya is the illusion that can be removed by human effort. That is Avidya. And Maya means the illusion which the soul can never cross. Just like the energy, God appearing as energy, that is illusion. And energy appearing as matter, another illusion. Nobody can realize God and get rid of the concept of energy. Nobody can get rid of matter, realizing the energy. So this is actually Maya, the only one word. Mahamaya is actually the Maya. And I brought the meaning of Maya to the level of avidya because it is Maya itself, three classifications, three types are introduced now. So avidya I took as Maya, and this actual Maya I took as Mahamaya, and then Moola Maya. Moola means reason for this. What is the Moola Maya? That is entertainment. Otherwise, nothing would have, no use would have come. Moola means root reason. So based on that, I have brought avidya as Maya, and actual Maya as Mahamaya, and Moola Maya I have taken. Moola means the root of the Maya. Hello? Hello?
Yes, Swami, you are audible.
Audible. So I have brought like that. Actually, it is avidya and Maya. Only two terms exist. Okay.
Correct, Swamiji. So avidya is the individual ignorance, which in this case.
Avidya is represented as Maya.
Yes.
Then Maya is shifted to Mahamaya.
Correct.
Then Moola Maya means what is the root reason for all this? For all this Maya and Mahamaya, what is the root reason? Root reason is Ekaki Naramade Sadmiti Maichyat.
Correct.
It is wish for entertainment.
Hello. Swami, one question. Hello.
Hello?
Swami, can we say that Moola Maya itself is the awareness of God?
Moola Maya is awareness of God. Why? How it can be awareness? Because even to get a wish like entertainment, there should be pre-existence of awareness. Since awareness is present, that wish came. That wish itself is not the awareness. Wish is a mode of the awareness. Awareness already exists. Awareness is the root material. Gold, like gold. Necklace is one wish. Another wish is bangle. Another wish, ring. See, these wishes, particular wishes, they are just different modes of awareness, which require the pre-existence of general awareness. That general awareness cannot be a particular mode. The necklace alone cannot be gold. So general awareness is not Moola Maya. Moola Maya means the root reason for this entire Maya. Of course, avidya also comes in it because Maya is there. Human being is created. Human being is getting illusion, and that is avidya. So for all this whole creation, what is the moolam? What is the root reason? The root reason is the wish for entertainment. Wish for entertainment cannot be the general awareness. Wish for entertainment is a specific mode of the awareness. It is a thought. Thought requires pre-existence of general awareness, you know?
Yes.
So anyway, you record this question, I will explain. Huh? I will also give in writing. Huh?
Yes, Swamiji.
Okay, Swami. Swami.
Pranamam. I am Prasad here.
Yes.
Swami, Prakritim Swamadhishtaya Sambhavam Yatma Maya. Can we relate this to the Moola Maya?
No, this is what I am telling. There, you see, only one word Maya is used. Maya Vaichitre. Maya Vaichitre means it is wonderful, unimaginable, beyond logic. Maya is only one word. But another word, Moola, is added there. Moola Maya. Mahamaya means it's a magnitude. A very big magnitude. Mahamaya.
Cosmic illusion.
Mahamaya is big Maya is Mahamaya. Moola Maya means the root reason for this entire Maya, for both the Maya as well as avidya as well as Mahamaya. For all this, what is the root reason? The root reason is wish for entertainment. And the wish for entertainment cannot be general awareness. Sambhavamya Atma Maya means by my Maya. See, avidya also can mean Maya. See, for all this illusion, the one word Maya can be used, in which avidya also can come. See, as per the context, you have to take the meaning. Sambhavamya Atma Maya. Prakutim Swamadhisthaya Sambhavamya Atma Maya. Ajobisam Nandiyatma Bhutanam Ishvirobisam Prakutim Swamadhisthaya Sambhavamya Atma Maya. Even though you don't have birth really, but Janma Karma Divyam Yavam Yo Vyakti Tattataha. I appear as if I am born. That is Maya. Because he gets identified with the Prakriti, and the Prakriti is born, and it is superimposed on the God also. God is born. That's why he says Janma Karma Me. Me means God. Bhutanam Ishvaropisam. That is superimposition. So, Atma Maya. Maya means, actually, its original word is Maya Vaichitre, unimaginable. Vaichitre means when you get wonder, when you don't understand, you get wonder. So, that is unimaginable. The unimaginable power of the unimaginable God is called as Maya. This is Mula Maya, Mahamaya, we have created these two words. These two words are not in the scripture. Only Maya, Indro Maya, Bhikpururupa Iyate, Parasya Shaktir Vividhaiva Shruyate. So Maya is the only one word. Maya Antu Prabhukam Vidhi, Mayinantu Maheshwaram, Mama Maya Duratyaya. Actually, Mama, he told that Maya is Duratyaya. You cannot cross the Maya. There, I have taken Mahamaya to that level. Actually, Maya itself is Duratyaya. I have brought this Maya to the level of Avidya because you have introduced three words. But actually, it is said, Mama Maya Duratyaya. You can never cross my Maya. There, Maya means Mahamaya. See, that's a readjustment. Since I have used three words, I have readjusted the meaning. That's all. Otherwise, there are only two things. One, illusions can be crossed by the human being, that is Avidya. And second, the unimaginable power of unimaginable God, which cannot be crossed by the human being. That is Maya. Okay?
Understood, Swami. Understood. Dhanjasma.
So this also please record. I will explain it in writing. These two
Yes,
are
sir.
good questions.
Yes, sir.
Swami, I too have one question, Swami. I am Bharat Krishna. Related to this, I read in biography of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. In that, it is written that Swami Vivekananda is blessed with an experience by Ramakrishna Paramahamsa that as entire creation as energy. He couldn't even like feel his own body. Like he was experiencing entire creation as energy, like that, some experience. I don't know if that is real or unreal, I mean fake, but I read this. Is this true? If it is true, like that means that he has crossed the material world, right? By the grace of course, the Lord.
Ramakrishna Paramahamsa keeps his foot on the head of Swami Vivekananda. Then everything starts dissolving. The world is getting dissolved. His body is dissolved. Like that, then he cries. Then the Paramahamsa removes his foot from his head, telling, this time, this much is sufficient for now, for this time.
Okay, sir.
Foot from the head. So that is the experience, because he is incarnation, human incarnation of God. He is giving the experience of the Maya. This Mahamaya also is unreal for him. His experience is passing on to the soul.
Okay.
Everything is dissolving. The body is dissolving. The world is dissolving. Then he feared and he cried loudly. See, he asked, did you see God? Yes, I saw God. Then he places his foot on the head. And then Swami Vivekananda gets the experience of dissolution of the world slowly, dissolution of his family, dissolution of body. When his body is dissolving, then he shouts a lot. That means that this matter is unreal, this energy is unreal, I am only real. To that state he is taken, Swami Vivekananda. That is the experience of God. That is with reference to God. His experience he is passing on to the soul. Because of his omnipotence, he can do anything.
Yes, Swami. Understood, Swami.
So that Maya Metam Tarantite, he momentarily he showed him that. Huh?
Yes, Maya Metam Tarantite. That is what he has shown, that dissolution of matter, dissolution of energy. He has dissolution of energy. He has not shown the dissolution of energy and the appearance of God. He has shown the dissolution of matter into energy. At that time, the body dissolved and he cried. Because if he shows the dissolution of energy, this soul also dissolves.
Yes.
From soul is also a form of energy.
Yes, Swami.
It is a specific work form of inert energy in the functioning nervous system. So if he has taken to that next level, that is disappearance of energy and appearance of God, then Swami Vivekananda's soul will also disappear.
Understood, Swami.
So in the first dissolution of matter, appearance of energy, there he cried. When his body is dissolving, he cried. Then he started telling, for this time this is much is sufficient. That is, the first dissolution is sufficient. I am not taking him, I am not giving him the experience of the second dissolution. There is a dissolution of energy, appearance of God. That he has not taken to the higher level. He has taken to the high level. He has not given the experience of higher level. That is why he told, this time, this step is sufficient. This much is sufficient for this time. Then later on, in one satsanga, he told about the dissolution of the energy also. You see, he gave an example. A salt doll went to measure the depth of the sea. Then it entered the sea to measure its depth. Then the salt doll dissolved in the sea. This is the dissolution of energy and appearance of God. The highest. Are you following?
Yes, Swami.
Yes, Swami. Yes. Excellent.
Excellent, Swami. Excellent example.
Salt doll dissolving means the soul is dissolving. The energy is dissolving. That is the highest step. Next is only appearing, God is appearing. So this second step he has indicated in that saying that the salt doll wanted to measure the depth of the ocean and it entered the ocean, but finally the salt doll itself got dissolved in the ocean. There he says salt doll means the soul, the energy. That is dissolved. Energy is dissolved. What is that ocean? That ocean is God. So there are two steps of dissolution. Dissolution of matter appearing energy, first dissolution. Second dissolution is dissolution of energy appearing as God. Under the dissolution of energy, dissolution of soul also comes because soul is also a form of inert energy.
Understood, Swami. Yes, Swami. Excellent, Swami. Thanks, Swami.
So the Ramakrishna putting his foot on the head of Swami Vivekananda and giving that experience is about the first dissolution. Then in Satsanga, then he is narrating the story of the salt doll measuring the depth of the sea. It enters the sea and it gets dissolved. That indicates the second dissolution. Hello?
Yes, Swamiji, wonderful.
Dissolution of energy, appearance of God. So these two things, if you correlate in one sequence, that gives the total picture. First state and second state. So
Yes, sir.
by state, he is telling that the soul is also a form of energy. It is not the God. It is not the ocean. Salt dal is not the ocean.
Correct.
All got dissolved.
Clear, Swami. It is very clear, sir.
The soul is also created by God. When one original soul is existing, a duplicate soul is created by Krishna. If soul is eternal, soul is God, how there can be duplicate God? You know, Krishna created cows, cowherders, etc.
Yes.
Yes, Swami. Yes.
Soul is created there. There can't be a duplicated soul. The soul is God. If the soul is a form of energy, he created a duplicate form of energy.
Understood, sir.
Yes.
Namaskaram, Swami. I'm Trilokya. Swami, you have said that the salt doll dissolving in the ocean. So, isn't it meaning that God is energy, but ocean of energy, but soul is energy like a salt doll? So it kind of gives that kind of simile, no, sir?
So there you see, ocean represents the unimaginable God. There, again, you see, for unimaginable God, I can't give a new example, you know. I cannot give an example for the unimaginable God. I can't pick up any item from the world, you know.
Yes, Swami.
So the Prakriti Drishtanta Bhavat, Prakriti Drishtanta is not present for the unimaginable God. Because unimaginable God is created and everything is created, rest is creation. From creation, I cannot give an example to the creator.
Yes, Swami. Yes, Swami.
Ocean which I gave there is unimaginable. It has to be taken as unimaginable God.
Yes, Swami. Yes, Swami.
The salt doll should be taken as the soul.
Yes, Swami. Thank you, Swami.
Shall I continue reading, Swamiji?
Yes, yes.
That completes that question related to the three types of Maya. Now the next question is by Srimati Padmaram Garu. She asks, can we pray to past human incarnations of God while learning spiritual knowledge from the contemporary human incarnation? So her detailed question is as follows. She says, God is only one. So is it all right to remember or pray to any past human incarnation of God while learning spiritual knowledge from the contemporary human incarnation? This is because some devotees have some special attraction towards the past incarnation. So Swami replied, you can worship and pray to the images and statues of past human incarnations to develop theoretical devotion towards the human incarnation. The merit in such worship is that you have basically realized the importance of the human incarnation. If you have full faith in the contemporary human incarnation, why do you not worship and pray to the contemporary human incarnation himself? You can even clarify all your doubts with the contemporary human incarnation who is present directly before you. Moreover, you will get full satisfaction when you practically worship the contemporary human incarnation, since he will enjoy your practical sacrifice. But if you are worried about the loss of precious materials that you offer to him, then you can worship past human incarnations. You will not lose anything when you worship the images or statues of the past incarnations. You can offer food and other materials to the image or statue and then enjoy it yourself. Thus, the preference for worshipping past incarnations is only a question of applied economics and applied commerce. Unless one conquers ego, jealousy, and greed, developing full faith in the contemporary human incarnation is not possible. Excellent point. Applied economics, applied commerce. The next question is by yes, Swamiji.
That Datta always touches the root point.
Yes, Swamiji. No, we also don't realize what is exactly going on in our mind. We have some feeling, but we don't know what is causing that feeling. That exactly you will point on that thing only.
So, you see, so far we were thinking only there are two walls that hinder the worship of contemporary human incarnation, that is ego and jealousy.
Yes.
Now the third point also has some third hindrance, that is
Greed.
greed.
Yes.
That is related to applied economics and applied commerce.
Yes, Swamiji.
If you can offer food to God, provided he doesn't eat.
Yeah.
If he starts eating every day, will you offer? So there are three walls: ego, jealousy, and greed.
Yes. The two walls only we were not able to overcome. Now third one has come. Okay. The next question is by Shri Navachaitanya. The question is the current reservation system for jobs or college admissions justified? The Swami replied, this question is related to pravritti or worldly life and has nothing to do with spiritual knowledge or nivritti. Reservation is done because certain sections of society are suffering due to poverty and age-old ignorance as a result of the long suppression by the more developed sections of society. Reservations are justified in order to encourage these suppressed sections. Reservations are justified in admissions and in giving all facilities free of cost to those people. But once the candidate is admitted to the college, and once his disadvantage of economic backwardness is fully taken care of by the financial aid, the candidate should be expected to work hard and face the open competition. Only then will the candidate get serious about his or her academic development. If the candidate knows that there are reservations even in the jobs, the candidate will not be serious enough to develop and face the competition. Thus, by having job reservations, you are suppressing the candidate's development in another way. Then the past history of suppression will only get repeated. Instead, give him all the facilities during the study period, but do not show the path of reservations in jobs to the student. If the student finds out that there are reservations also for jobs, he will take his studies lightly and will lose the motivation to work hard and develop himself. The next question is by Kumari Lakshmi Trailokya. She asks, how can I expose priests who cheat the public, promising to remove our sins by performing some ritual? The detailed question is, Pada Namaskaram Swami. Priests in different religions claim that they can help devotees get rid of their sins by performing some rituals for them. Some priests say that the sins will be transferred upon themselves, which they will later get rid of by doing some additional rituals at home. By studying your discourses, I understood that the karma of any soul cannot be transferred to other souls, but I am unable to disprove the above claim made by the priests. Please tell me how to disprove their claims. Swami replied, logic used to carry out sharp analysis, which is supported by the scriptures, is the only path to disprove any wrong claim. The scripture says that the fruit of the deed must be enjoyed by a soul, and that unless the fruit is enjoyed, it will not vanish even after millions of births. The statement in the scriptures is, Avashyam anubhoktavyam krutam karma shubhashubham nabhuktam kshiyate papam kalpakoti shatairapi. Even after 100 koti kalpas, crores of kalpas, the fruit of the deed, if it is unenjoyed, it will not vanish. simply. You have to enjoy it. Whether it is good or bad, but it has to be enjoyed. So God has clearly said in the Gita that he will neither cancel the good fruits nor the bad fruits of the deeds of any soul. Nadatte kasyachit papam nachaiva sukrutam vibhuhu. He also said in the Gita that ignorant people claim otherwise and exploit the innocent public. Ajnanena vrutam jnanam tena muhyanti jantavah. God has given only one path to burn the fruits of sins, which is the path of realization by spiritual knowledge, which leads to repentance, which in turn leads to the non-repetition of the sin. This is told in the statement, Jnanagni sarva karmani bhasmasat kurute tatha. Even a sinner can be reformed by long, serious and sincere devotion. By the grace of God, such a sinner, being a strong devotee, will come in contact with a divine preacher and get reformed. There is another statement in the Gita which says, Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvat chantini gacchati, and so on. Parthaya prati, kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. Very, very beautiful statement, very powerful statement. God has given his assurance of reformation to those who surrender and accept his spiritual knowledge. We can get reformed no matter how serious criminals we are, how serious sinners we are. Apichetsu durachara yo bhajate mam ananya bhag. Very, very beautiful statement. Swamiji has told this many times. And when we are depressed and when we feel we have so many defects, this statement gives a lot of encouragement. In this way, in the long run, there is a possibility of burning one's sins. So the only path given by the Gita, basically what Swamiji told earlier, the only path of burning the sins, if we are interested in cancelling the sins, the only path given is get reformed through spiritual knowledge. First realization, then the repentance, and then the non-repetition. This is the only single path. What the priests are telling is that bypassing this knowledge, you can somehow, through those rituals, you will somehow be able to remove the sins. That is wrong. That is completely wrong. So this is the point that Swamiji is saying. So I'm continuing to read. But it is, yeah. So in this way, in the long run, there is a possibility of burning one's sins. But it is not possible immediately without the person's reformation. The false theory of immediate cancellation of sins is propagated by the priests so that they can earn their livelihood. They charge fees from the innocent people to carry out different forms of worship, which are claimed to cancel the fruits of their sins immediately, even without their reformation. No reformation is possible by reading some hymns in Sanskrit, which are not understood by anybody doing the worship. The actual way of doing the ritual is that while doing the worship, the priest must explain to the person what he is reciting, so that the person may get realization through the spiritual knowledge preached through the Sanskrit hymns. The present way of performing the rituals accompanied by the blind recitation of the Veda does not help the person doing the worship in any way. Therefore, if a ritual is not helping in conveying spiritual knowledge and devotion to the public, it is a waste. This important fact should be preached to the priests who conduct these rituals for the public. Only upon getting realization through spiritual knowledge will there be repentance, and only after the repentance there will be non-repetition of the sin. Hence, preaching spiritual knowledge through the ritual is the most important aspect of the ritual. You think that God will be pleased with your ritual worship done without spiritual knowledge? You think that he will cancel the fruits of the sins done by you and that he will grant you the good fruits of the meritorious deeds that you never did? This is totally wrong. For such worship and prayers done by you, he will only rearrange the fruits of your deeds. He will postpone the fruits of your sins due to which you are suffering in the present. But in this rearrangement, interest will be added. So the postponed punishment, which is the fruit of your sin, will grow and you will have to suffer more in the future. He will also prepone the fruits of some meritorious deeds which you were supposed to enjoy in the future and bring them into the present. In this preponement, there will be a reduction in the value of the fruit enjoyed by you. Even this rearrangement is done by God, provided God has some hope about the devotee's future reformation. If he has no such hope in the case of the devotee, even this facility of rearrangement of the fruits of deeds is not extended to the devotee. So that completes the recent discourses, like this week's discourses. We can now go backwards and going into the discourse on July 17th, 2020. So the question is by Shri Lakshmanji, and he is asking, what is the difference between salvation and liberation? His detailed question is, Pada Namaskaram Swami. In a forum, one person was mentioning that by salvation, rebirth cannot be avoided, but by liberation, it can be. So what is the difference between salvation and liberation? Please enlighten me. At your lotus feet, feet of Swami Lakshman. Swami replied, O learned and devoted servants of God, salvation is a synonym of liberation. It is just an alternative word for liberation. Salvation and liberation are basically the same. Both mean attaining freedom from bondage or slavery. Salvation conveys the same meaning as liberation, but it is a term that is specifically used in spiritual knowledge. Similarly, love and devotion mean the same, but the word devotion is specifically used in spiritual knowledge. It is the same old wine in a new bottle. Love for God is specifically denoted by the word devotion, just like liberation from the world is denoted by the term salvation. These specific terms are indicative of the sacred context in which they are used. Love for one's worldly bonds is denoted by the word love, while the love for God is denoted by devotion. The secondary scripture says that our love for worldly bonds, which is prema or priti, when directed towards God, is called devotion or bhakti. So prema or priti, which is in the worldly context, that itself can become bhakti if it is diverted towards God. So this is some verses are quoted here from the Vishnu Purana. The context is Lord Bhagwan Mahavishnu is very pleased with Prahlada, and he asks Prahlada, I am pleased with your devotion, you please ask some boon from me. So Prahlada asks this boon. He says, Natha yoni sahasreshu yeshu yeshu vrajamyaham teshu teshvachyuta bhaktir achyutastu sadatvayi. And the next verse he says, Ya pritir avivekanam vishayeshvana payini Tvam anusmarata same hrudayan mapasarpatu, which basically means that, O Lord, in all the thousands of janmas, whenever I am born, in that may I have an undying devotion towards you eternally. That is the boon that Prahlada is asking through the first verse. In the second verse, he is very sharply, he is making one point. He is saying, Ya pritir avivekanam, the avivekas, the ordinary people who are not very devoted, who don't have viveka, those people, they usually have an undying love towards their worldly bonds. That vishayeshvana payini, undying love towards their worldly bonds, they already have that. So that same love, you don't remove that love completely from my heart. Instead, you retain that so that it is redirected towards you. It will help me continuously remain attached to you, continuously remembering you. But to this verse, Swamiji composed himself, he composed another verse where he exactly gets to the point perfectly. That I will read out the verse. You will see how Swamiji is exactly, without beating around the bush, exactly he's hitting the target. Yana Pritir Virupaksha Vishayeshwana Payini Bhaktirityuchyate Saiva Tvayi Chet Purushottame. So what Swamiji is saying, that undying love that we have towards the worldly bonds, O Virupaksha, O God, that itself is bhakti if it is directed towards you. So that's Swamiji has, what Prahlada said is that in my case, you give me the boon that may my love towards worldly bonds not disappear from my heart, but instead be directed towards you, like a special case. But Swamiji is saying that bhakti is nothing but the same worldly bonds, the love towards the worldly bonds, which is redirected towards God. So this is a very perfect thing. This it generalizes that concept and makes it available even for us. So really beautiful verse. Let me read it once more. The verse composed by Swamiji. Yana Pritir Virupaksha Vishayeshwana Payini Bhaktirityuchyate Saiva Tvayi Chet Purushottame. So I think this verse is really worth memorizing. It is very beautiful. So continuing to read, salvation or liberation from worldly bonds never cancels rebirth. So just to remind you, we are discussing what is the difference between salvation and liberation. So Swamiji has said that salvation is specifically used in the spiritual context. Liberation can be liberation from any bonds. So salvation or liberation from worldly bonds never cancels rebirth. Even God, who is fully liberated from every bond, takes birth again and again in this world. Does the soul who has attained salvation or liberation become greater than God himself to escape from rebirth? The absence of rebirth only means the absence of the fascination for worldly bonds after being reborn in this world. It also does not mean the absence of worldly bonds in a physical sense. Sage Narada asked God Brahma to name somebody in the world who is a real celibate, a real brahmachari. God Brahma replied that Krishna alone was the real celibate in this world. Sage Narada was shocked because Krishna had married 16,108 wives and produced 10 sons and 1 daughter through each of them. Sage Narada used to think that a real celibate must be a bachelor, a person who is unmarried. As per Narada, a married person could not be a bachelor, and hence he could not be a celibate either. So Narada was expecting God Brahma to name some unmarried person as the real celibate. But in the real sense, an unmarried person need not be a celibate, while even a married person can be a celibate. So what is the actual meaning of the word brahmachari? Here we are using the word celibate, but the actual word in the context was brahmachari. So what is the meaning of this word brahmachari? It is commonly understood to mean a celibate, but brahmachari actually means he who knows the entire knowledge about God. Brahmani charati iti. The verb charati can mean going, but it can also mean knowing, because it is a gatyartha dhatu. It is gatyarthanam dhatu nam jnanarthakatvat. They are any verb which indicates going from one place to another, going. Those verbs can be used in the sense of knowledge. That going can mean knowing. So to go can mean to know. So since Brahmani charati, that charati means it means going, but in this context, in a spiritual context specifically, it means to know about Brahman. So the person who has the entire knowledge about God is the brahmachari. So God Brahma clarified this point to sage Narada. All this was also explained by Lord Krishna in the Gita, where he says, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan, etc. So liberation is a general word. Salvation too has the same meaning, but is a term used specifically in spiritual knowledge in the context of a soul getting liberated from worldly bonds, and it is a state attained by the full grace of God. Such a blessed soul, upon salvation, is reborn again and again along with God in this world. He accompanies God to help God in his program of propagating spiritual knowledge, theoretical devotion, and practical devotion. Generally, people pray to God asking him to bless them with the boon of escaping the cycle of rebirth in this world. The actual sense of such a prayer is to avoid being reborn as a person who is deeply fascinated by worldly bonds, as a result of which the person cannot make any spiritual progress. Avoiding human birth altogether is a misunderstanding. Being free of worldly bonds means being free of the mental fascination or attachment for worldly relations and items. It does not even mean the physical absence of relationships or worldly items. A sage sitting in the forest might appear to be physically free of worldly bonds. But if he is mentally attracted to worldly bonds, he is a bonded soul. The Gita mentions this case as mithyacharasa uchyate. He is a mithyachari. He is a pretender. He is not a genuine case of liberation. On the other hand, King Janaka, who led a family life like Krishna, was also a liberated soul. Karmanyaiva hi samsiddhim asthita janakadaya, I think that's the statement in the Gita. The Gita says that the most intellectual scholar finds action in inaction and inaction in action. Karmanya karmayah pashyet, akarmani cha karmayah. So you must find the worldly action in the sage sitting in the forest as a result of his worldly bonds, and the absence of worldly action in kings like Janaka and Krishna. So kings like Janaka and Krishna, they were with the worldly bonds, whereas the sage was apparently far away from worldly bonds, but the reality was completely reversed. The sage was a bonded soul, and Janaka and Lord Krishna were liberated. Worldly bonds are not external but internal. Shankara says that even a married worldly devotee can be a real celibate. Bhogaratova, he says, Yogaratova, Bhogaratova, Sangaratova, Sangavihina, Yasya Brahmani Ramate Chittam, Nandati Nandati Nandatyeva. That's a verse from Bhajagovindam. So, Bhogaratova, even he might be in Bhoga. What is the meaning of Bhoga? He might be in the world. He might be enjoying the world. Externally, it may appear he is enjoying the world, but Yasya Brahmani Ramate Chittam, his mind is completely absorbed in God. So that external appearance of his attachment to the world is not real. He is only enjoying the bliss of God's company internally. So the Gita says that even a worldly devotee can remain detached from the world like a lotus that remains untouched and unwetted by the surrounding water. Padmapatram ivambasa. The beauty of the lotus leaf, in fact, since I am a material science engineer, the lotus leaf has got very special properties. If you drop water on it, the water just, it doesn't wet that leaf. Like other leaves, if you drop water on it, they will get wetted. But the lotus leaf doesn't get wetted at all. The water droplet, like it forms like a ball and it just rolls off. It doesn't wet it. So that is why in our scriptures and many acharyas also, they have given this upama, this analogy of the lotus leaf to show how a person can remain detached while being with the worldly bonds also. So that is given in the Gita also. Shankaracharya also mentions that. So death is not salvation and birth is not bondage. So by birth, you appear to be bonded to your mother and your family and everything. But that is only the external part. And with death, you appear to be separated from those worldly bonds, but that is not actual salvation. So death is not salvation. This is really worth making a quote actually. Death is not salvation and birth is not bondage. A very beautiful statement. Then what is salvation exactly? Salvation means mental liberation from worldly bonds and not physical liberation from worldly bonds. Bondage means mental fascination to worldly bonds and not physical association with worldly bonds. So this is a really remarkable answer. Thank you, Swamiji. Really beautiful. It was so many things got to learn through that. The next question by Balaji, Sri Balaji. The question is, for solving worldly problems, should devotees pray to the human incarnation of God or to energetic forms and idols? So his detailed question is as follows. Namaste Swami, kindly clarify on the following incident in Sai Satcharitra. So there's a short passage from the Sai Satcharitra. A devotee of the Divine Mother, Sri Kakaji, was troubled by worldly circumstances and did not have peace of mind for a long time. On praying to the goddess, she directs him to meet Sai Baba. By mistake, Kakaji goes to Triambakeshwar temple of Lord Shiva, thinking that Lord Shiva is the Baba mentioned by the goddess. He does lots of prayers over there, but without any relief to his problems. Then the goddess corrects him and directs him to meet Sai Baba in Shirdi. Kakaji goes to Shirdi, meets Sai Baba, and finally gets peace of mind, which was missing in his life for many years. So that is the passage from Sai Satcharitra. So now Dr. Balaji continues. He is asking, the Divine Mother, Lord Shiva, and Sai Baba are all the same God. But for learning divine knowledge, living together with him and practically serving him, Sai Baba was most relevant and most convenient for devotees. You can only live with Sai Baba. You cannot live with Lord Shiva and Divine Mother. So that is why the human incarnation was most convenient. That's what Dr. Balaji is saying. But in the above incident, even for peace of mind and relief from worldly problems, the goddess wanted the devotee to approach only Sai Baba. From the above incident, can we say that even for worldly problems, the incarnation is the ruling deity on earth? This is in addition to the great fortunes that we can get with the contemporary human incarnation, which includes receiving knowledge from him, living with him, practically serving him, and so on. So that is the question by Sri Balaji. Swami replied, a human incarnation like Krishna, Sai Baba, etc. is the most relevant form of God for a human being living on earth. An energetic incarnation like Vishnu, Shiva, etc. is most relevant to energetic beings living in the upper world. God descends on earth in a human medium for the sake of uplifting human beings. The same God also simultaneously remains in an energetic medium for the sake of energetic beings. The God in any incarnation is one and the same. Only his body, which is the medium, may either be human or energetic. When a person changes his clothes, does the person also change? The body is like an external dress as per the Gita, Vasamsi Jirnani Yatha Vihaya. Human beings are souls present in human bodies. There is a foolish repulsion between human beings due to their common human bodies or common media. The cause for this repulsion is the ego and jealousy present in every human being. The foolish human being feels this common media repulsion in the case of the human incarnation of God also. As a result, the soul in a human medium fails to recognize and surrender to God, who is also present in a human medium on this earth. The villagers of Vrindavanam did not recognize Krishna as a human incarnation of God due to the same problem. This problem is not limited to souls in a human body, but it equally applies to souls in energetic bodies in the upper worlds also. For the same reason, the energetic being Indra could not recognize God Shiva as an energetic incarnation of God and lifted his weapon to wound God Shiva in Shivaloka. Energetic beings not only neglect the energetic incarnation due to the repulsion between common media, but they also do not care about the human incarnation, since they think of human beings as lower beings. Indra neglected both God Shiva, the energetic incarnation in the upper world, and God Krishna, the human incarnation on earth. Human beings neglect the human incarnation due to the repulsion between common media, but at least they care for the energetic incarnation. This is because human beings think that energetic beings are superior to human beings. But unfortunately, energetic incarnations of God are not seen by humans because they are irrelevant to human beings living in this material world called Earth. The same human beings, after leaving their human bodies in death, take up energetic bodies to become energetic beings. Then in the upper world, they neglect the energetic incarnation, which is again due to the repulsion between common media. Thus, souls incur a permanent loss since they neglect the human incarnation while they are on earth in human bodies. So basically three reasons. Swamiji is giving 3 reasons why souls incur a permanent loss. Okay, so first reason why they incur a permanent loss is they neglect the human incarnation while they are on earth in human bodies. That's point number 1. Point number 2, they care only for energetic incarnations which are not seen on earth. Okay, and the third reason why they incur a permanent loss is that after their death on earth and after becoming energetic beings, they continue to feel the repulsion of common media for energetic incarnations in the upper world. So due to 3 reasons, souls incur a permanent loss. When they are in human bodies, they neglect the human incarnation. When they are in human bodies, they cannot reach the energetic incarnation because it is invisible on earth. And third point is when they become energetic beings upon death, they neglect the energetic incarnation also. So ultimately, in all these 3 ways, there's only loss, 3 times loss. So in general, continuing to read, in general, the soul neglects something when it is before its eyes and craves for something, for the same thing when it is far from the eyes. This is told in the Veda, Paroksha Priya iva hi devaha, Pratyaksha Dvisha. Poet Kalidasa says that when an elephant is before the eyes of such a person, he says that it is not an elephant. Then after the elephant goes away, he studies the footprints and confirms that it was an elephant. Yatha gajoneti. Kalidasa is wonderful with upamas. Upama Kalidasasya is unbeatable in his upamas. The analogies, the similes that he gives, he is world famous for that. All this analysis shows that the most easily approachable form of God on earth for human beings is only the human incarnation. This was the intention of the goddess in guiding Kakaji to Sai Baba. There is a great difficulty in approaching an energetic incarnation of God. The devotee has to first see the energetic incarnation before the energetic incarnation can preach spiritual knowledge to the devotee. Then, as a result of the preaching of the energetic incarnation, the devotee will have to develop devotion, which will finally have to be put in practice in order to please God. The problem is that in this sequence of steps, the first step itself takes the time of an entire human lifespan. First, to get one darshan of the energetic incarnation itself, it will take our entire lifespan because human lifespan is relatively short. And one has to perform a lot of tapas to get even one few seconds vision of the energetic incarnation. So there is not so much time in our life. So the devotee has to perform severe lifelong penance to get a vision of the energetic incarnation. Then where is the time left to complete the other steps, which is taking divine knowledge from him and then practically serving him? Not possible. So the energetic incarnation takes a very long time to appear to human beings because the same God is already available as a human incarnation on earth. God wants the devotee to realize his error in approaching the energetic incarnation when the human incarnation is easily available for the human being. So God's delay in appearing in energetic form before a human devotee is due to the fault of the devotee and not due to the fault of God. God has already appeared in human form on earth to get his one second. God has already appeared in human form on earth, and to get his vision, the devotee does not have to waste even a single minute on doing penance. The human incarnation is directly visible to anybody and everybody. So people are fond of the energetic incarnation due to two reasons. The first reason is that they have rejected the human incarnation due to the repulsion between common media, which in turn is due to their ego and jealousy. And the second reason why people are fond of the energetic incarnation is that it is economically convenient to worship the energetic incarnation either through a representative form of God, like an image or statue. Either through a representative model like an image or statue, or even without any representative form of God in an open place. So when God is not actually in front of you, you can express some devotion and there's no need to do any practical sacrifice. So your money remains with you and you are very happy. That is the main reason. So the economic convenience is that offering of food and other things made to the energetic incarnation remains only a mental offering. It is not actually consumed by God, so we can consume it ourselves. If we offer it to the human incarnation will actually consume the offered food. This is the second reason. This second reason is hidden in our mind. It makes us want to offer the food to God, and at the same time, we do not want God to consume it. It means we want to get the benefit of practically offering the food to God without incurring the financial loss involved in practically offering it. Some people mock at the people offering food to images and statues of energetic incarnations of God, saying, "Why are you offering food when God is not eating it?" I say to them that the day God starts eating the offered food, from the next day onwards, no one will ever offer any food to God. It is only because the offered food is not being eaten by God that people are offering it to him every day. Of course, if this angle of economic convenience is absent from the heart of the devotee, then even such mental offering of food can be beneficial, since it will at least increase the devotee's theoretical devotion to God. That completes this discourse. Swamiji, it is 9:24.
Okay.
So we can.
Swami, shall I read the questions? Some questions came out in the WhatsApp group, and also some others has posted their questions in this group. I will be reading those questions, Swami.
Yes.
So first question is by myself, Bharat Krishna. The question is as follows: will there be boredom in doing God's service even if the one who is serving is a climax devotee? I am particularly asking in a case if God asks a particular devotee to do a single type of work for a very, very long time, that might lead to boredom. Will there be possibility of boredom in true love? This is first question, Swami.
Yes,
Second question. Second question, Swami. This question is asked by Anita Renkuntla. Swamiji Pada Namaskaram. Do correct me if I have misunderstood the following. First point: human incarnation preaches spiritual knowledge to humans on the earth to uplift them or to reform them as people does wrong deeds and accumulates sin. Energetic incarnation in other worlds is meant for energetic souls. Actually, above worlds are meant for enjoyment only, as no karma is done there. Therefore, there is no question of doing sin or bad deeds. Then why do energetic souls worship or pray energetic incarnation? Does energetic incarnation also preaches in the other worlds? The second point is Lord Dattatreya is worshipped in three lokas, Triloka Pujya. Isn't he the Lord of 7 lokas? at your lotus feet. Next, third question, Swami, again by Anita Renkuntla Garu. Swami, you said Datta existed in me even when I was present in my mother's womb, but I was not aware of Datta at that time. Swami, you also said that Datta got merged in you in Sri Sailam temple. It was a practically experienced by you. Now, I am not able to correlate the above two statements. Lord Datta was already there in your body. Then what is the hidden meaning in merging with you again? Is it for preaching spiritual knowledge? Next question, Swami. 1 minute. Next question by myself, Bharat Krishna. The question is as follows. I feel that the very selfishness which makes us become madly involved in this world itself is an addiction. Is it correct, Swami? And next question, Swami. This question is asked by Suganya Raman Garu. The question is as follows. Pada Namaskaram, Swami. This is about fear and ego. Is my understanding correct, Swami? I feel most sins happen out of fear. Fear of losing ego may lead to cheating to feed one's ego. Fear of failures may push one follow some illegal methods, etc. Fear of telling the truth leads to hiding it, and it is as good as a lie. Except the natural fears like the fear of fall and sudden sound, can other fears be a form generated just to feed one's ego? Is having fear also a sin? So these are the questions asked for today, Swami.
You can send them.
Yes, Swami. But yes, Swami. I will record and send. That's all the questions for today, Swami.
Now, Mahima,
Swami, namaskaram, Swami. Swami, namaskaram, Swami. Shall I? Am I audible, Swami? Vinapడుతుందండి?
Yes.
Okay. Namaskaram. Last week, till last week, satsang, we have gone through the various darshans, Brahma Lahari, which was completed in the last satsang. From today onwards, we are entering into Vishnu Lahari, wave of God Vishnu. Curing my illness at once. This is the first one in this Vishnu Lahari. After touching Atmalingam that appeared on the chest of Swami in the midnight of Shivaratri festival, I was often becoming ill. Once I was admitted in the hospital in unconscious stage and I was put on saline. My mother was bringing Swami to the hospital in an auto. She told Swami, I know you as Lord Venkateshwara in human form. My son is also a very strong devotee of Lord Venkateshwara from childhood. Hence, you must give me back my son, relieving him from the present danger. Swami replied, if you really believe me as human form of Lord Venkateshwara, certainly your son will come home at once, but you must donate your son to me for my service. My mother agreed to that, and I was cured of my illness suddenly and returned to my home in very short period. My mother told my father all about her conversation with Swami. My father became angry, telling, how can you alone donate our son without consent from me, since both of us have equal right on the issue? Then I interfered, telling, do you remember about a dream that came to my mother when I was a 6-month child? Sorry. Lord Venkateshwara appeared in the dream and asked her to donate me to him. Both my parents recollected and agreed to this fact. Then I continued, do you also remember that my mother replied the Lord, saying that how she can donate me to Lord since I was a very small child, just born. Both agreed to this also because my mother told my father then itself about her reply also to the Lord in the dream. Then I continued, do you also remember that the same Lord appeared to my mother in dream again when I was 17-year-old, asking her to donate me to him? My mother replied in dream that how can she donate me to a statue since the Lord is not in human form? Both recollected that also since my mother was informing my father every time about her dream. Then I continued, do you also agree that Lord Venkateshwara is in the human form of Swami from recent incident of interview for my job at Chennai? This incident is already mentioned in Brahmalahari, in which Swami gave proof that he is the same Lord Venkateshwara. Both my parents agreed to this point also, since both experienced this directly in this recent incident. I further continued, now add all these 3 points to get the answer. 1. Lord Venkateshwara asked my mother to donate me to him in a dream when I was a tiny child and also when I was a boy of 17 years. My mother replied in the first dream that how can she donate me as a small child, and again replied in the second dream that how can she donate a boy to a statue unless the Lord is in human form. 3. Swami gave proof that he is the human form of Lord Venkateshwara and then only asked my mother to donate me to him since Swami proved himself as human form of the same Lord. The Lord in human form asked only my mother since my mother only got dreams and she only expressed that how the donation of son can be done to a statue unless the Lord is in human form. All these 3 points put together give the final solution of this issue. Let me be donated to Swami for his service. Otherwise, the sin to tell a lie to the Lord will arise in your case. Both my parents were satisfied with my analysis and agreed to donate me to the Lord in human form as per the promise given to him by my mother in dream as well as in auto in awakened state also. Swami's comment. Your parents must be appreciated since they did not go back from the word given as assurance in a very long back dream. They were bound to their promise given to God in a long back dream. Being the issue of such good parents, you are also very strictly devoted to offer yourself to the service of God in order to protect the promise of your mother to God. God asked you for his service based on your such good personal nature and also based on same good nature of your parents who were bound to their promise given in a long dream. Your life history resembles the life history of a devotee, Markandeya, who was blessed with very short longevity. Lord Yama came twice to take away Markandeya, and the parents were giving excuse like birth function and function of thread marriage. Lord Yama came for the third time, like me, to take away the boy. 2. The next miracle. Curing illness of a student. In Machilipatnam, Sri Subbarao, retired income tax officer, is having a son studying BTech and is suffering with a peculiar illness, which is that he gets the bad smell of his own sweat that results in vomiting. Several doctors were consulted, several medicines were used, several astrologers were consulted, and their remedial suggestions were implemented, and several saints were worshipped, but there is no trace of any use. Finally, the father came to Swami and prayed Swami to give cure to this burning problem. Swami refused, saying, when so many saints could not do anything, I, a petty devotee, can't do anything. When so many doctors who were experts in applied chemistry to the human body couldn't do anything, I, a professor of pure chemistry, can't do anything. Then the father fell on the feet of Swami, weeping that he will not leave the feet of Swami since he came to the human form of Lord Datta. Then Swami gave a little vibhuti, sacred ash, to him. The father went to his home and applied that sacred ash on the forehead of his son. That peculiar disease disappeared at once, and the student continued his studies with perfect health. Swami's comment: that soul insulted and mocked others for their bad order of sweat in the past birth. This is the punishment of that sin. This is the reason why Swami tries to escape from the cure, since the normal regular cycle of deeds and punishments should not be interfered even by God being the lawmaker. However, the miracle is to be exhibited in the context of initial pickup from devotees for the sake of program of human incarnation. The adjustment by postponement of punishment is a routine matter of the divine administration, about which proper steps are always taken by the deity of justice, cooperating with the miracle required for the divine program. All this is the secret background of any miracle, unknown to the devotees. Of course, if God in human form suffers, there is no need of any adjustment. Such transfer of punishment is judged by God, examining the deservingness of the devotee to get transformation. Next miracle. Protecting a devotee from death. Srimati Satya Kumari is a devotee of Datta. She came to the house of Sri C.V.K. Murthy to see Swami. She saw Swami emitting very strong radiations of light energy, and this was revealed by her. She started shaking terribly. Following conversation took place between her and Swami. Swami, who are you? She, I am Lord Dattatreya. Swami, if you are Datta, then who am I? She, you are myself. You are myself. You are myself. After this, she became normal. After her leaving, Swami told CVK Murthy, she is going to die by heart attack today in the midnight. If she prays me, I shall protect her. Then CVK Murthy hurried to phone her to inform about this. Swami warned not to inform this to her, since this information itself may bring heart attack. She was not informed. That day in the midnight, she phoned Swami to protect her life as she was suffering with lot of heart pain. Swami assured her protection, and she was revived with good health immediately. Swami's comment: this devotee who got heart attack was a government lady officer in the past birth, doing lot of financial corruption, due to which one lady devotee got heart attack, who was unable to bribe her. This is the punishment for the Swami predicted the exact time and date of death of his mother and aunt quite long back. This father and uncle were astonished, since the deaths happened exactly on the day and time predicted by Swami. Swami did not interfere with their deaths through both, though both were very close to him. Devotion is more important than family bond for God in human form. Next miracle. Protecting the life of a boy. Sri Prabhakar was a good devotee of Swami. He was having a son who is a boy of 5 years. Once, the boy was seriously attacked by illness, becoming unconscious, and Prabhakar wept before Swami. Swami, please protect my son from danger. Swami told, no fear. I will drive away the soldiers of Emma, deity of death. That boy was also a very good devotee of Swami. Whenever he sees Swami, he falls on the feet of Swami at once. Both the parents did not take the boy to the hospital, keeping full faith in Swami. Both did not sleep at all throughout that night, sitting before the boy. Swami was also sitting near the boy, since Prabhakar stayed in a portion of my house only, and Swami was also staying in our house on that day. In the midnight, Swami looked into space with anger and shouted at some invisible but visible to Swami people, saying them to go back. After some time, Swami became peaceful. The boy also recovered immediately. Swami told that he drove away the soldiers of the deity of death. Swami's comment: the illness of this boy was due to adulteration of food grains in his past birth, in which he was a businessman. Next miracle: curing back pain and stomach pain. Back pain. The third son of CVK Murthy, Ramana, in Hyderabad, got severe back pain in one night. His wife was trying to phone to doctors. Ramana phoned to Swami in Vijayawada to protect him. Swami took that pain and Ramana was immediately cured. Swami suffered with mild back pain for several years after this. B. Stomach pain. Miss Jyoti in Guntur was an excellent devotee of Swami. She invited Swami to her and introduced her grandfather, who was suffering with severe stomach pain for the past 6 years. She showed a full rack of bottles of medicines used for that illness and said that no trace of cure was found. Even if he takes very little food, the terrible stomach pain appears immediately. Her grandfather gave a dozen banana fruits to Swami as offering to God. Swami took one fruit and ate it, saying, I have taken your stomach pain through this fruit. Now itself, you eat the remaining 11 fruits if you have faith in me. Her grandfather ate all the 11 fruits, keeping full faith in Swami, and no trace of pain appeared. From that night onwards, he was taking full meals and never experienced any pain in stomach. But in the same night, Swami suffered with such intensive pain in stomach, jumping in lying condition on the bed, so that the plastic strings of the cot were cut due to those jumps. Next day, she came and fell on the feet of Swami with total surrender. Swami's comment: Ramana was a lady in the past month having a cow, and she hit its back with a strong stick, and this is the result of that sin. The grandfather of Jyoti was a greedy person in the past birth who was not giving food to any hungry beggar, and this is the result of that sin. I took the first pain in small quantities for a long period, and I took the second pain totally in very short period of one night. Both are one and the same, depending on time and intensity. Namaskaram. Jnanam veha
भोजिर्वा यत्किञ्चित् दर्शितं मया
yachitam maya.
गुरोरेव चापल्यन्तु मम ध्रुवम्.
Namaskar, Swami. Namaskar. Yes.
వాయిస్ ఎందుకో బ్రేక్ అవుతున్నది అజయ్ గారు.
స్వామి, ఇవాళ కొద్దిగా ఇక్కడ నెట్ సిగ్నల్ సరిగ్గా లేదు స్వామి ఇవాళ, అందుకని
కొంచెం
మధ్యలో కొద్దిగా బ్రేక్ అవుతున్నట్టుంది. మళ్ళీ లేకపోతే రేపు నెక్స్ట్ వీక్ కూడా మళ్ళీ ఇదే చదువుతాను స్వామి, లేకపోతే అదే అలాగే. నమస్కారం స్వామి, కొద్దిగా సిగ్నల్ సరిగ్గా ఉన్నట్లేదు స్వామి, కొత్తగా కనెక్షన్ పెట్టించాము అందుకని అలా ఉంది సార్.
ఈ ప్రెజెంటేషన్ చాలా బ్యూటిఫుల్ గా ఉంది
స్వామి. నమస్కారం స్వామి, మీదే అంతా అసలు చదువుతుంటే ఒకసారి అలా మళ్ళీ రోమాలు లెక్కపడుచుకుంటున్నాయి స్వామి, అన్ని చదువుతుంటే మళ్ళీ
వస్తున్నాయి మీకు.
చాలా 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 బాగుంది స్వామి, అన్ని చదువుతుంటే గుర్తొస్తున్నాయి అన్ని మళ్ళీ. అద్భుతం. దిస్ ఇస్ ఐఎమ్ ఏబుల్ టు రిమెంబర్ ఆల్ దోస్ ఇన్సిడెంట్స్ which have occurred in front of us, all of us, Swami, during those days. So it is giving goosebumps for me when I am reading these This one.
I understand. Sai Baba asked Padmaram.
That is why. Correct, Swami. That is the reason. With your comments also, excellent, Swami. Beautiful comments. This one. With your comments for each and every miracle, what has happened, why it has been done, all those things are excellent, Swami. It is giving love.
Jnana is below Mahima Yamuna.
Yes, Swami. Yes, exactly. That is matching with the what you have told. That I am just wanted to tell. You have told, Swami. Whatever you have told, that is exactly happening, man, Swami. Exactly, it is resembling. That is
Yamuna Sangamam was there, is there.
Swami.
The Saraswati is below both the rivers.
Swami. Exactly,
So,
Swami.
Saraswati is in Bhaktiganga and Mahima Yamuna.
Yes, sir.
Underlying unseen Jnana Saraswati is below Bhaktiganga as well as below Mahima Yamuna.
Swami.
Now that Jnana is brought up, is exposed.
Yes, sir. Excellent. Excellent way it has come, man, Swami. Namaskar, sir.
Okay.
Swami Dayante. Namaskar, sir.
Service you are doing.
Swami.
Now my Bhaktiganga.
Yes.
Yeah, Panushkam Swamiji.
Namaste.
श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे उन्मत्तनटनताण्डवं मत्ते भवदनभासुरं चित्ताब्जबोधभास्करम् आयत्तयोगराजितं विद्वेषनित्यपूजितम् उत्तानपाणिमुद्रितं श्रीकृत्तिवाससुतं कैलासदृशदिनर्तनं भक्तान्तरङ्गवर्तनं पापौघपाशकर्तनं श्रीपार्वतीसुतं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे लम्बोदराङ्गताण्डवं मुद्राकराब्जपण्डितं सर्वाङ्गनागमण्डनं वन्दे विनायकं पतिम् धिं धिं मितकिटमर्दलं भं भं निनादशङ्खकम् आनन्दनृत्यतत्परं ध्यायामि प्रमथनायकम् आमोदकरमोदकं वेदान्तमतिमादकं दुष्कर्मफलसाधकं विघ्नेश्वरं गुरुं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे सृष्टिस्थितिलयकारणं मोक्षाख्यदैत्यमारणं संसारजलधितारणं स्तौमि प्रभो नरवारणं पञ्चास्यमादिदैवतं देवऋषिभिः समर्चितम् आलोकगलितसञ्चितं विघ्नाधिनाथमाश्रये श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे लोकैकपरमवैभवं लोकेश्वरादिसम्भवम् परिणतोद्भवम् आलोकये परं भवम् श्रीकृष्णकविनिवेदितैः श्लोकाख्यमोदकैरिमैः आनन्दगणपतिं पतिम् आराधयन्तु साधकाः श्रीदत्तगणपतिं भजे 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 याचे श्रीरामं तवास्मीति याचे श्रीरामं श्रीरामं रघुरामं कल्याणरामं कोदण्डरामं पट्टाभिरामं पावनरामं याचे श्रीरामं तवास्मीति याचे श्रीरामं शरणं भव शरणं भव शरणं भव श्रीराम करुणां कुरु करुणां कुरु करुणां कुरु रघुरामा करुणां कुरु रघुरामा याचे श्रीरामं तवास्मीति याचे श्रीरामं तवास्मीति तनुविजितकामं हतदितिजस्तोमं नवजलदश्यामं मैथिलीवामं हनुमदर्चितं भरतपूजितं लक्ष्मणवन्दितं शत्रुघ्नसत्कृतं लक्ष्मणवन्दितं शत्रुघ्नसत्कृतं सीतासेवितं याचे श्रीरामं तवास्मीति याचे श्रीरामं दशरथात्मजं विपुलाक्षिवारिजम् एकशिलीमुख हतदशमुखभाजम् हंसारोपिता दिव्यशाङ्गकोदण्डम् आत्मना व्याप्त चराचर जगदण्डम् आत्मना व्याप्त चराचर जगदण्डम् याचे श्रीरामं तवास्मीति याचे श्रीरामं गौतमसतीशिला शापविमोचनं शान्तविलोकनान्त करुणामृतसेचनं बालशरदं धरां शुरोचनं स्फुरत्तरुणमीनायत विलोचनं स्फुरत्तरुणमीनायत विलोचनं याचे श्रीरामं तवास्मीति पट्टाभिरामं पावनरामं याचे श्रीरामं तवास्मीति याचे श्रीरामं शरणं भव शरणं भव शरणं भव श्रीराम करुणां कुरु करुणां कुरु करुणां कुरु रघुरामा करुणां कुरु रघुरामा याचे श्रीरामं तवास्मीति याचे श्रीरामं तवास्मीति याचे श्रीरामम्
Pani ji?
स्वामी स्वामी परब्रह्म समारंभां श्रीदत्तात्रेय मध्यमां श्रीदत्तस्वामी पर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां सर्वविश्वन्यस्तपादपद्मायते वामहस्तालोलवेदशास्त्रायते ज्ञानसूर्यायते दत्तरूपायते श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् गुरुदत्त श्रीदत्त प्रभुदत्त पाहि मां विधिदत्त हरिदत्त हरदत्त रक्ष मां पाहि मां दत्त रक्ष मां दत्त। नमस्कारं स्वामी।
नमस्कारं स्वामी।
नमस्कारं
स्वामी।
నమస్కారం
పాదరం
నమస్తే పాద నమస్కారం స్వామి.
నమస్కారం
పాద నమస్కారం
పాద నమస్కారం
స్వామి పాద
నమస్కారం స్వామి
పాద నమస్కారం స్వామి.
పాద నమస్కారం
నమస్తే స్వామి.
పాద నమస్కారం. పాద నమస్కారం.
పాద నమస్కారం స్వామి.
నువ్వు చెప్పు. పాద నమస్కారం స్వామి.
పాద నమస్కారం స్వామి.
జై గురుదత్త.
జై గురుదత్త.
గురుదత్త శ్రీదత్త. గురుదత్త శ్రీదత్త. గురుదత్త శ్రీదత్త ప్రభుదత్త పాహిమ.
కొంచెం తెల్లగా అయితే బాగుంటుండేమో కదా. అరే